Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Kyler Cheatham, and thank you so much for joining our Bite Size Live. I am super pumped for this conversation. It's definitely one that I think is super unique, but also very important and underserved in our industry. So I am joined by the SAP AppHaus team today, and we're going to talk about the importance of considering user design in the overall implementation experience. So before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few logistics. If you've been to Bite Size Live before, thank you. Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you here. If you're new here, we are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, of course. You can pop your questions for this team in real time in the chat, and we will address them as much as we can here. If you are joining after the fact, feel free to drop your comments in there and I will tag them so they can go back in and answer after the fact. The mission of Bite Size and our interview today is just to add some transparency, understand there are many options in the marketplace for your technology stack, and your feedback and question and insight helps us kind of have that transparency and understand there are many paths to the destination of technology optimization. So with that, in the chat, if you guys can just test it out for me, obviously we're implementation specialists, so we love to test, and just let me know where you're joining from in the world today in the chat. Just drop that in. And if you have any experience with SAP AppHaus or the user design team here. So I'd love to hear from you, and go ahead and drop that in the chat wherever you're joining from. Now that the logistics is out of the way, welcome team. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always great to have a panel discussion around the importance of understanding what this unique area is in the industry. It's actually something that I am not at all ashamed to say that I didn't know. So I'm excited to be able to have you join us today and kind of educate us around user design in general. So with that, I'm going to pass it to BD Thomas, which we're just going to call him BD because that's the coolest nickname ever. And we're going to just do some quick introductions. And if you wouldn't mind telling us what you do at SAP AppHaus, that'd be very helpful as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kyler, for inviting us. I'm happy to be here, especially with my colleagues, who is a really good average of the AppHaus and what it needs to do user-centered or human-centered design. I, by myself, I studied visual communication already 35 years ago, so I'm a designer by heart for all my life. And 12 years ago, the SAP AppHaus opened up, and that was for me the first time SAP was interesting for me in the area of design or user experience. Today, I still am a big fan of user experience and human-centered design, but I also evolved. We are doing now workshops. I'm a partner manager from SAP AppHaus Network Partners in APJ. But every day it's very curious what the next day brings, as in the AppHaus we have the ability to be creative and also to shape our team and our work for ourselves, and that's a pretty good thing, and that's why I'm still, after 12 years, in the same team, and I'm happy to have these kind of colleagues, because the professionalism in the team for me is the highest I ever experienced in my whole career. So kudos to you all, and
That's excellent. Definitely very, very cool. Let's go over to you, Peter. Peter's frozen. He's lost in the cloud. So we'll go to you, Toby, before we go to Peter.
All right. Yeah, I'm Toby Gollwitzer, 10 years with the SAP AppHaus. And in the early 90s, when I finished my high school, I was not sure what to do. And my coolest friends were all user experience designers. So I decided to do a dual scholarship at a full service design agency in our area. Then I was somehow trapped in the SAP partner and SAP ecosystem in the engine room kind of for some years before I then 10 years back joined the SAP AppHaus and again had the chance to work a bit more on my passion for design and user experience.
Amazing. Awesome. And what about you, Karen?
Yeah, well, I am also more or less like BD, a designer. So I studied multimedia animation and design long time ago, and that was a bit of a mix of programming, design, and animation. So I've always been interested in content creation activities, and that was kind of the perfect mix because it allowed me to bring an idea to life in many ways. And I'm already at the App House. So I started as a UX designer. I'm already in the App House 11 years. And I morphed more or less into a strategic designer more. And I'm currently focusing more on methods and best practices in our team. So being responsible for conceptualizing, distributing, and also enabling people on our methods, the methods that we have, and basically human-centered innovation methods.
That's excellent. Very, very cool. Well, I think Peter's back. We'll see if he's ready to do an intro. He might need a minute here to join back in. But other than that, this team is so cool. It's very rare that we get a lot of creatives in our industry, and I think that's something that we've seen specifically in looking at areas of opportunity in 2025, that we see kind of that rise of that business technologist. So how can you essentially make sure that you're communicating what the user needs with the actual experience that they're getting, so that we can see things like user adoption rates and all of that? So thank you to the audience for dropping all of these questions. Already we're off to a good start. I love it when the audience does my job and just starts asking questions, and I'm just, the facilitator here. But we've got some joining from the States here. We've got some from Dublin. We've got a few from Latin America. So definitely a global audience that's joining us today. So I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about kind of the why behind the App House and what that really looks like, as far as why that was a need for SAP. So I'm going to start with you, Toby. If you could kind of explain to us what the App House is, and then explain why SAP felt like that was an area in which they really needed to explore.
Yeah, the SAP AppHaus is kind of an SAP internal design team, innovation agency, kind of. And it was founded around 2011-12 in a time where SAP was not really known for good user experience. And yeah, there was even, I think, worse. Some customers even asked for either improvement of user experience or they look for another vendor. And that was the moment where we recognized, okay, we have to kind of get better, especially in the front ends we provide to the end users to consume our applications. And in the time, we also had a technology shift. So we went from a, let's say, front end terminal landscape with the SAP GUI to a more cloud grade kind of architecture with our Fiori applications, where we have now web front ends. And so the first effort we had to do was really kind of taking a, let's say, T-code transaction from SAP, for example, for sales order creation, and kind of decouple it and make it kind of available for the different user types, which are kind of accessing these application, and then have for, I don't know, a pre-sales person a different scope than for a salesperson and for a back office person. So to kind of provide for each user type exactly what they need to do with the application, and really slim or slice and dice kind of these big T-code transactions into small single-use applications which are really tailored for one particular user type and need.
That's amazing. I think that that's so smart. And then doing that in 2013, I didn't know that's when AppHaus was founded. And I think, that was a time in which there was a lot of SAP saturation in the marketplace, as there is today, right? But there was more of kind of this attitude of you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, as we say poetically here in the States. And it wasn't something that we were trying to kind of show users, especially in an implementation, the why behind this big change. And so with this question from Mick, Peter, what I'm going to do is double whammy here. So I hope you're ready for it. I'd love for you to first introduce yourself now that you're not lost in the cloud, and let us know kind of what gap was SAP trying to close. I know Toby mentioned, they had kind of this reputation for poor user experience, but building a whole in-house agency is kind of a big way to address, we might not have the best user experience, especially for a tier 1 system.
Okay, sorry for getting lost
No
in the
worries.
cloud. So this is Peter. I joined the AppHaus 2 years back. I'm purely focused on technology and on architecture thinking nowadays, of course, in business AI. So I'm bringing the technology or the technical expertise into that. Well, what gap was SAP trying to close? I mean, there was definitely a need for it. Otherwise, we won't have been alongside with SAP now for 11 years. And I think what we clearly understood is that without the end user's perspective, creating nice software or products or application does not really make sense. So that's at least my 5 cents on that question.
I think that's a great question. And we'll definitely get to, so I see some agentic questions and all kinds of stuff coming in around AI. So we'll tap you back in just a few minutes here. So how do you work with kind of the rest of the team at SAP in that space? Do you design and kind of work with the engineers, or what does that really kind of look like? And Karen, I'm going to go to you with this question.
Sure. Yeah, so we work with other teams in SAP, of course. We tackle pretty much the first phases of a project, right? So from the identification of the problem with the customers, and then helping them or co-creating with them ideas that would feed to these problems. And in those phases, we already have the parts of or members of the implementation teams that lie not on our team. So these are other teams in SAP, depending on what is the outcome of the project, right? If it's a POC, then it will be a team that can create these POCs. If it will be more a production in the future, then we will have members of those teams. And then after this phase, it's very important to have them there at the very early stages as well. We, of course, work with them, hand over also all the outcomes of what we call the discover and design phase. And those outcomes are, for example, a prototype, a click-through, a prototype, or also a journey map, so that they have enough information to understand the requirements from the users. And we, of course, follow up with them until the solution is hopefully implemented.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's definitely so interesting. I just picture you guys kind of being like the cool kids at SAP, like coming in with all of these very cool design ideas and getting the engineers to kind of come on board. And I know, Toby, you have some additional insight to kind of add to that question.
Yeah, as I said, so at the beginning, we mainly kind of tried to kind of bring into SAP this notion of human centricity and user experience. And then it kind of got picked up. We had in that time a very strong chief design officer within SAP. And then we helped our central design team to also implement a new development process within SAP. And it's called design-led development. And this new process has certain predefined milestones. For example, they can't kind of continue with requirements engineering if the user is not defined upfront in a way of a persona, for example. Or then also later on, they need to have a low-fee wireframe before they do backend requirements and things like that. So it's more a, let's say, front-end first approach with a very strong emphasis on the user and the user needs. And that was kind of, let's say, invented in the AppHaus and then kind of infused into SAP and all the core processes.
Absolutely. And I love this question from Mick, and I'm going to send this to you, BD. And I'm going to ask kind of a little bit of a different way. The question for those of you listening on an audio version is, how do you balance creativity and user-centered design with the technical constraints of an enterprise-level solution, like SAP would be an enterprise-level solution for most users? And I think a lot of this speaks to just the overall mission of AppHaus is that kind of user-centric design. So can you speak to this a little bit, BD?
Yeah, sure. And that's why I'm so happy that we now have people like Peter with us. Because when I joined the AppHaus, we have been mainly driven by designers and usability and user experience. Even I was focusing on that. And we really did shiny, great designs. But finally, we got stuck when it's coming to implementation because we have been focused too much on our designs and all the stuff and didn't think about too much about architecture and development. And that's why also we invented this design thinking and architectural thinking in one stream. So also in a very early phase, we involve architects, developers like Peter, and I enjoy the working today. At first, it was a little bit strange because you get limitations, but you also learn what is possible and what makes sense. And this combination, only if architects, developers, and designers work together in one room or in one project early on, this is so fruitful for everybody. And also now with the AI topic coming up, Peter with his expertise is helping us a lot, because I also don't want to dig too deep into technology and constraints. Everybody has his focus, and yeah, that's the way how we work together.
Absolutely. And I think that balance is something that everyone experiences between the technical team and the user experience team. And there has to be such a baseline and a strong foundation of mutual respect in that conversation to understand that everyone is working towards a unified goal of making a good experience and creating return on investment for the technology. But at the same time, sometimes you have to concede a few things to the expertise of the technical team and vice versa, right? So I think that that's such an interesting piece. So going to you, Peter, I'd love for you to kind of talk about maybe real world innovation or a co-innovation that you've had that showcased customer success, whether it's just internally working across the SAP team or externally for a customer.
Yeah, happy to do so. I just wanted to also step onto the comment from BD. So it's likewise, right? So it's not just only designers are benefiting from the technicians, it's also the other way around. And I think I do not want to share any details which are details on customer success which are IAP relevant. But what I can say is, if you're meeting first time, I think you need to understand that developers or architects, they have a different language. They will come up to your sessions and have the solutions already in mind. And one of the greatest experience for me as an architect or also enterprise architect is that I always remember those people saying, hey, forget about your solution you have in your mind. Follow us, follow our methodology, our structured approach, and let's see what's happening. And we saw a lot of success stories. I mean, you can see, or we are also referencing some on our webpage, right? There are a lot of success stories. And the key is always keeping the end user in scope in mind, in the center, so that at the end, the architect can say, okay, I understand this is the need of the end user, but please, end user, understand that we have some boundaries in the technology. And so comes both things together, and that's basically the key and the key of success from the AppHaus.
That's amazing. Yeah, so important. So just to turn to the audience real quick, I see all of these amazing questions. So I just want to validate that I'm getting them in here, and I promise I will get to conversations like AI and all of those different things. We just, as always, in Bite Size need a foundational of what are we talking about and why are we talking about it. But keep those coming. If we don't get to them, I will certainly go back and comment. And you guys know that I always go back in and address every single question here. So thank you for doing that. Keep them coming. With that, I'm going to go to one that we kind of just talked about in design. And I'm actually going to go to you for this one, Toby, because I feel like I gave Karen a really hard one last time. So I'm going to give you this one. So for those of you listening on our audio format, does your focus on design for the user draw parallels to agile development or methodology? Or would you characterize it differently? So this user basically is asking, when you look at designing for the user, does it follow that agile methodology where you look at user base design?
That's a very good one. And I sometimes, when I try to explain our approach to customers, I try to phrase it in the following way. So our human-centric approach to innovation, which kind of is mainly based on design thinking, is kind of the complementary piece to agile development for requirements engineering. And in our approach, we have a 5-phase approach. The first phase usually is explore. And in explore, we're trying to find, let's say, the sweet spot, where to start. And that's something we do usually, let's say, with management level. And then we have a discover phase. And in discover, it's mainly researching. And also what Peter said earlier fits there. We don't solution in discover. We only look to the customers, their circumstances. We go with a truck driver on a lorry for a full day. We observe production workers in a factory. We went on a ship with Shell going to an oil rig, even after a full day security training. So we really always try to first understand where and how are the users working, which kind of things are they suffering with, and those things are not covered in agile development. So first of all, I need to kind of build up a proper foundation of knowledge. What do our customers struggling with? What do they need to accomplish? And what are the circumstances? So that's where we do then the requirements engineering, but more from a, let's say, problem perspective. Then the next phase in our approach is the design phase. And here we clearly suggest a UI first design-led approach, because it's always better to show a future user or another stakeholder within your company a mock of the to-be solution, because you get totally different feedback. Instead, if you would give them, I don't know, a textual blueprint, right, where they have to kind of give their feedback to if they read it, which I sometimes doubt. And so then means we also kind of usually tell our customers, don't forget those requirements from the business. Don't even look into them. Invite them to a workshop. We will kind of work on those requirements, but don't put them in the foreground. So, and then after design, in the design phase, we continue with these kind of feedback loops as long and refine our prototypes till the customer or our product stakeholders say, yes, that's exactly what we need to fulfill the initially stated problem. And then, only then, we would recommend to start coding. And then it's also the handover to agile development, which means some of our development teams within SAP, they have done something like a sprint 0, which is exactly what we do in our human-centric approach to innovation.
Yeah, I feel like the design phase are a lot like an agile implementation. In those phase type of iterations, we take feedback, we activate that feedback, and we're able to come up with, and scale to the next area that we're designing for. So excellent question. And then, and BD, I'm going to go with you on this one just because this user had another question before. He said, hello, BD, nice to have you here. Explore and discover workshop formats are really great and effective. I use it extensively. So this follow-up question is, we are partners of SAP. If I need your support in driving end-to-end workshops, in all 5 phases, how can we facilitate and initiate for the same? And it's a 2-part question. Also, will it be some specific charging model from SAP? So I know some of this you may be able to answer, some you won't be, but since they called you out, BD, I got to send it to you. So
I tried, and I know the one maybe for the second question.
Yeah.
Huh, Toby? Because I know Sachin for a longer time or via LinkedIn, so we are in constant exchange.
Good.
Nice to meet you, Sachin. And I know that he's using our workshop models that Karen is responsible, so maybe later we can talk about that. But the simple answer is contact us if you would like to work with us. For sure. Maybe it's also a little bit important that we are also a team who try to talk about what we do. So like we do this today. So our mandate is also to share our expertise and our experience so that more companies can join this kind of work. Because I know as a designer, the ratio from designers to developers in a software company is not very good. So the designers are always have a lot to do, let me tell you like that. And that's why we try to get good projects where we can talk about also where customers share their experience with the work with us, to show that this human-centered approach is so valid, because we always struggle to show the business value of user-centered design. And that's from the bottom of my heart, since I started 35 years ago, where nobody was interested in that. Today, we are also on stage at Sapphire at SAP, for example. So it's already a big step we took for UX and human-centered approach, but there is still so much left we can do. And that's why we like to do projects where we can show what it's capable to do. And the second question is definitely Toby.
Okay, let me maybe chime in. And also, I think, Sachin, I guess ultimately you guys also need to invest into missing skills, because I think our partners would ultimately need design competency to run successfully such kind of projects. Without, it's really hard, ultimately. And of course, we have in our SAP partner benefit catalog, there is certain entries which you can kind of purchase, and with that kind of get our support. So that was kind of the easiest way, I would say, for an SAP partner. If you are a customer and you want to do a human-centric innovation project, which is somehow connected with one of our products, just feel free to approach one of us, and we would then kind of see what we can do for you. But usually, as Peter said, if you have a challenge where SAP has not yet managed to kind of make you successfully satisfied, then we are, I think, the right guys to be asked and to go.
Good. Excellent. Well, thank you for this great question. I think this one kind of goes along with it, and I'm going to go to you on this one, Karen. I know BD kind of mentioned metrics and looking at what that really means, but the question is, how do you measure the success of a project that's been designed with empathy and user insight? What metrics or feedback do you rely on? BD kind of touched on, like, what is the business value of doing this, and how do you explain that to an IT team that is all centered around engineering, metrics, architecture, output, those types of different things?
So, well, this is actually a very hard one. It's very hard to measure. It's very hard to measure the benefits at the very beginning, right? Because so the lack of having human-centered design in a project, you can only see it much later on. So you can only see it when the project, when the application is either not adopted, or the people have a hard time to use it. And you don't see it right away when that application is being designed and developed. This is much of the reason why a lot of teams hesitate, or development teams might hesitate in including human-centered design in their process, because the benefits are not really so easy to measure from the very beginning. And I mean, when we measure business value, we try to find some metrics at the beginning of a project. Something that it's very important to do is to align with the decision makers at the very beginning of whatever you're building, whatever you're going to design, to understand what they want to improve in their company. What are the KPIs they are interested in improving? At that time, is very hard for them to pinpoint a number and say, okay, we want to reach this. We want to reach 50% improvement. We're going. It's hard. They might not come up with this number. Yeah, they might not have it, but you have a direction in which you want to go, and then once at least you want to reduce a certain KPI in a certain amount, you have a certain direction, and when the application is introduced to the users or is rolled out in the company, then only then you can start measuring this adoption or this improvement in satisfaction, whatever you are measuring, and then use whatever those KPIs or those business value numbers that you agreed upon in the beginning to see, okay, this is what it is improving. So yeah, that's what we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, miss on that, especially in kind of that phase 0, that pre-implementation phase, and understanding that user adoption metrics are often the most important metrics. And those can be a huge piece of creating adoption within the company. Where, especially a company that's an SAP user size, there's not an ability, right, to really create that stick versus the carrot to see at that volume. Are they actually integrating with the new system within their workflows, or are they creating workarounds? If we don't consider user design, then that overall adoption is going to drop significantly. So thank you for answering another hard question. Karen's like, I'm never coming back to this again. So we've made it to almost the 40-minute mark and not talked about AI. So I know I see that in the questions here. So
that's great.
Peter, I know, right?
Yeah.
Usually these guys know I do usually wait till the 30-minute mark so that we can talk about foundational things before we look at future innovations. Not that AI is a future innovation, because I know a lot of, what SAP is doing. I'm sure what you guys are doing is very AI focused, or at least efficiency focused, through using those types of emerging tools. So Peter, you're up, my friend. How are you shaping Gen AI and agentic AI through design?
Yeah, also a good question. So first, the whole space is evolving really rapidly, right? So if you're using one tool today, that might be not the latest one. If you're using it, if you would like to do something very special, and shaping Gen AI and agentic AI through design. Our work mainly consists in bringing these technologies on a structured way to the audience, right? And I just call it audience because they consist basically on every type of audience when we pop up, right? And most important is of course also because sometimes we also doing an AI inspiration session based on SAP technology. So what is the latest and greatest? What is possible? But when we come back to the design, as part of our design phase, we always try to come from an as-is process to be process. And in order to do so, we try to infuse AI in a very structured way. So opening opportunities, what is possible, and then see and evaluate where does AI really make sense. Because what we really like to prevent is to use for the sake of AI or to agent for the sake of agents. Coming to agents, if you currently have that discussion, I'm pretty sure that in 70% the cases, we are not talking about agentic AI, we are talking about deterministic workflows. And that's basically where we come in, and also our really super template-driven structured approach to bring the topic closer to the audience so that they understand what it is and what it isn't, where it can help, where it can solve also issues, and maybe also where it can fully automate processes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. And so what are your thoughts on kind of users using maybe agentic or low code, no code platform for their design work on the user experience? I'm just wondering kind of your thoughts on that, any kind of cautionary tales on that. And I'll go to you, Toby, on that one to kind of talk about it. And if anyone has any additional points that they'd like to share from that architecture standpoint, we'd love to hear it.
Let's maybe start with an analogy from the past. And 5 years back, we kind of at the AppHaus, we kind of mainly tried to help our customers to find, let's say, this sweet spot to implement innovative technologies within their companies. In that case, it was mainly like the topic of blockchain. And then we created a lot of blockchain POCs, IT-driven. A lot of them, let's say, ended in the POC stage. I would say nearly none of them ever got productized because they were always, let's say, really started IT-driven. How and where can we kind of leverage technology? And that is exactly what is not successful. And now in AI, we completely switched it around. And again, following the AppHaus paradigm of user centricity, we always start again, where do we have the sweet spot for what technology can do? And Karen, for example, created 8 typical Gen AI pattern. So something like, do you want to automate something? Do you want to kind of condensate from a huge amount of data or text, let's say, and aggregate things like that, which are typical what you do with Gen AI. And based on that, we inspire the customers and then first ask them, okay, where do you have currently business challenges? And only if we have a business challenge where one of those AI pattern could give a relief, only then we ask the customer to look a bit deeper in that topic. And then we follow again our approach, and we really kind of ensure with that approach that we only come up with use case ideas where the technology really has a proof and help from day one to create business value. And I think that's exactly which any innovative technology needs to be successful. And AI is just a placeholder here.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Absolutely. And kind of along this lines, we'll go over to you, Karen. And so another very similar question: how are you shaping Gen AI and agentic AI through design? And what role do these play in technologies for remaining user-centric? And I'll even kind of add to this, in that kind of 5-phased approach, when does AI, like, hey, we want to utilize AI, when does that come into the conversation in relation to design?
Yeah, so there are different occasions in which this comes in. So when the customers sometimes start already with this willingness to infuse AI into their processes, right? Because AI is pretty much a hype and everybody wants to have a piece of it. So we start most of the times very early, looking like what Toby said, looking at where it makes most sense to apply AI. What problems, independently of AI, we start, okay, what problems do you have?
Yeah.
And then, okay, what can you use from AI to improve this? What are new tools, thanks to, for example, generative AI, thanks to large language models that you have now that you didn't have before, that can help you to improve those problems? So that is mostly the norm, that it starts at the beginning with this willingness to apply agentic AI or to apply AI. But it can also be that we do an explore workshop that is normal one. It's not really focused on AI, and we see that out of that there are certain features, there are certain parts of the to-be process that we want to create that can be solved through AI.
Yeah.
AI is, at the end of the day, like Toby said, is a technology. Yeah. And what we always put the focus on is on solving a problem. And it can be that it's AI, but it can be that it's something else that helps to solve this problem. And that is the most important thing, to solve the problem that the customer has.
Absolutely. And understanding those pain points or those quote unquote issues that they're having. And a lot of times, I know, BD, we talked about this in our initial kind of pre-interview conversation. We hear a lot of 2025 is the year of AI for our business. AI is our strategy. And we talk a lot about how, well, that's not a strategy, that's a sentence, right? That means nothing unless you really understand what AI is actually bringing to the table. So in that workshop or that exploratory type of conversation, BD, how do you kind of convince the user that maybe AI isn't the best choice and this other tool or solution is something that they might consider? I assume a lot of times that's a universal language, whether we're speaking German or English or whatever we're speaking. But how do you make them kind of understand that, hey, this might be the best path for you, and just be open-minded that AI is not everything. It is simply, as you guys said, a tool.
I mean, you are right. It's difficult these days because everybody knows AI is important, and AI could solve a lot of problems. And if I take the turn on myself, I also desperately try to use AI because I know it can help me a lot. But as soon as it's making more problems and it took too long, then I stop it. And that's my own experience. And I think it's the same with the customer or an end user. If you can solve his problem and he has not the need I need from my boss to have AI, then he will always solve his problem, no matter if it's AI or not. And that's the good thing about our process, because we also show them their problems. For example, if we go through the as-is process, very often we have multiple departments, and they even by themselves don't know their problems from department to department. So we make it very transparent what kind of problems the company or the people there have. And seeing that for the first time often also turns off these technology stuff. It's turning on the understanding bulb. Oh, that's why we have this problem. In former times, Karen remembers that we got a customer who told us, now we don't need McKinsey anymore because you showed us already our own.
Talk about money. Talk about money there.
Yeah, exactly. We have been much cheaper. It was a side effect. So we did a big as-is process, and we found so many problems in the company itself that we could help them with that. And that was a side effect, not the core one. And that's why I believe if we strictly support the end user and the customers in experience what problems they have, then they can decide by themselves if they need AI. Besides that, if the boss says, I need to have something with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, building on that, Peter, how do you really keep the balance? We kind of talked about the balance between the architecture, the development team, and the design team. How do you keep the balance between technology that is evolving so fast and, like, technically, functionally, absolutely, we could integrate AI or process intelligence, operational intelligence into everything, but is it the right strategic move to balance with the people of the organization and not create a ton of disruption within the overall organizational culture, which ultimately, again, costs money? So how do you keep that balance as an enterprise architect?
Well, that's the aim of the game of an enterprise architect. I mean, first of all, you need to bring both parties on one table, right? That's basically also one key aspect in the architecture thinking, right? So we usually start with design artifacts and then go over slightly into architecture artifacts. So we are not just making a target architecture, so to say, right? In saying, hey, what's your problem? This is the target architecture. It's more an evolution, yeah, so that we come from the business capabilities. I mean, we mentioned that a lot of times today in that in this session, right? So understanding the business problems, nailing down the business problems to capabilities, mapping these capabilities to technical assets and data, and last but not least, you know, the core value of an enterprise architect is that he or she is the most relevant person to understand its own enterprise. So what is part of the enterprise and what is not? And does it make sense to invest into modern or new technology, for example, based on AI, on the AI stack, right? And yeah, that's the key work from an enterprise architect, to see, okay, where does it make sense? Where do we have return on invest? Do we really need it? Does it fit to existing components? Yeah, that's basically it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I like how you explain that so simply, but that is a huge, very complex project in understanding kind of what are the needs across the organization. I think a lot of times people forget that those things can be measured, right? We don't want to just make assumptions that everybody loves AI, right? Everybody is so excited for this. That's a lot of times where we see kind of these failures that we have referenced here in the comments. And as I always say, when we look at SAP failures, it's just because SAP is so big that those failures, often our global sized businesses, have very little to do. And I can speak to this, you know, as an expert witness on some of those cases, is the fact that a lot of times they're just bigger. It would be very similar. I have an interview on Bite Size with my friend Alexander Grebe, who also is German. And I interviewed him and I was like, well, some people have Taylor Swift, some people have Alexander Grebe in our industry, and it made his German self wildly uncomfortable. It's very similar to if Taylor Swift falls off the stage, right? And we see that level, as opposed to, you know, an artist that isn't as well known falls off the stage. We don't see as much press around that. So this question is around that. What are some common reasons you've seen SAP projects stall or fail? And how can a design thinking or AppHaus methodology help prevent that? And I'm going to kind of generalize it. A lot of projects stall or fail, right? Because they find there's design issues in the middle of the implementation project. So Toby, how would you address that? When you kind of are mid-project and you're like, oh man, this is going to blow up our timeline, blow up our budget, but at the end of the day, it's not working the way that we have it designed.
One of the reasons I mentioned already, so often they fail as they are not connected to a concrete business challenge. So that's, I would say, one of the most often seen failure. A second failure is that there was not proper research done. So that means the solution which has been designed is not fitting exactly to the needs of the target users. So that's the second biggest reason to fail. And let's maybe explain it from a real concrete scenario. So a lot of our customers currently are in this transformation from an on-premise SAP application into a cloud operated SAP application, and we call it the S4 transformation, because S4 is our new product name for the ERP suite in the cloud. And we are also kind of forcing our customers to go to something which we call the clean core, which means customers should go to the cloud and should leave aside a bit their modifications they've done in the past, to ensure that in the future in the cloud they can kind of gain from all the upgrades SAP is providing instantly, which is a bit difficult if you have a lot of modifications in the core. So now a lot of our customers are doing this transformation, and then close to the end they're waking up and they're recognizing, ooh, now we did everything SAP said, we followed that path, we are now in the cloud, it has a lot of advantages, but we lost a lot of things which made us special. So we lost the support of our very own core processes. We lost maybe certain flavors which made us different than our competition, for example, and lost a bit their soul. And what we say, the AppHaus methodology cannot kind of ensure everything and cannot help in any circumstances, but it can at least safeguard even such a project by ensuring that innovation is not set aside. So the AppHaus methodology is not the methodology for the transformation itself, but it supports along the way to ensure that the customers are not losing what makes them special. And I think that is exactly our role in those kind of bigger projects, where we always, again, start by identifying the challenge, the users, understanding them, designing the best solution for them. And then we call it the golden balconies we put alongside SAP's standard solutions and features.
Yeah, who doesn't love a good golden balcony? Absolutely. I love that. And I think that, that's so important in just considering that. And I think a lot of times we forget that in documentation, not only in requirements, but also in design features. If you've ever worked on one of these projects, you're getting briefs and you're filling those out and you're like, why can't I just go to your desk and say, I want this to work that way, right? Well, it's because we need those documented problems to ensure that we're, keeping the project on time, on budget, and then we understand the full picture here. So with that, I'm going to kind of do a quick round robin around kind of our final thoughts. Before I do that, I have one last question from the audience here. Is how do you ensure that your company internally is focused on design? Right. So there's a balance internally that you have the developers, you have the project managers, you have the engineers, but do you have a designer? Do you have an enterprise architect? What does kind of that competency look like? And I'm going to go to you for this one, BD.
Yeah, for me, it's a difficult question as I joined the AppHaus and I really don't know the original SAP because I always have been in the AppHaus team. I always have this mixture of colleagues with me. So I don't know about it. I only experienced that SAP did a big leap in adding design as a process into the company. And that's important. It belongs a bit about the chief design officer. How strong is he? How can he infuse our methodologies? But I also see for us, it's sometimes very hard to infuse our methodology into a big company like SAP. But as Toby said in the beginning, we succeeded partly because they saw with our projects that we are successful. And that's the way we try to do that. And it's getting more and more recognized how important that is.
Absolutely. And I think, Karen, I would be interested in your perspective kind of on this, even outside of the SAP world, right? That's a very complex system. Sometimes we have people that are implementing tier 2 systems where we're looking at an Epicor, Impor, all kinds of IFS, especially if you're in the manufacturing space. When you're looking at your core team for implementation or your core team just in general and looking at a new transformation, should you have a designer sit on that team?
I mean, design skills at least, or the knowledge about how to facilitate this design process. At least this is something I think that is important. And in that, I mean, in companies, and organizations like SAP, I think these, in order for it to run and in order for it to be part of how the things are done, it needs to pretty much come from the top. It's hard when there have been a lot of kind of grassroots movements as well within the company, but if these processes are not really mandated, if those gates kind of are not ensured, that you need to have a prototype, you need to have a persona, you need to have these things in order to pass this, to have the process that is running in that way, then it tends to fade away. And if the teams that are developing don't have enough time they have to release the things and they have pressure, they might not include this because there is simply no chance.
Absolutely. And I will even answer my own question. Absolutely. Why not, internally have a designer part of that conversation that understands the system and understands the processes in which the users are going to be familiar and comfortable with the system, especially if it involves a new emerging technology that might birth fear in that overall implementation. Having something that looks familiar from an industrial psychology standpoint is so critical, and people overlook that, and often that can cause way more issues than they even consider. So that's something that I think is so exciting about this conversation, and why I've been looking forward to having it so much is because this team is walking, living, breathing case study of how you can be successful and utilizing those two almost polarizing areas of the business as a cohesive unit to design a system that people want to use. How many times have you ever heard in an all-team meeting, I'm so excited to be able to showcase a new system? That's not often what we say. So okay, so let's do quickly. I just want to give you guys some kudos. We've got a lot of you tagged in the comments here, so you can go back in and comment. But really enjoying this webinar. Such a great shift from build first to truly understanding the why behind solutions. Design thinking adds so much value by keeping projects focused on what really matters to users. Such great insights. So just amazing job. And Toby, it looks like you're dying to say something.
Yeah, there's one thing to add. I think for me also, the designer is always, also during the development phase, the advocate for the needs of the end user. And we all know teams of 10 product owners, they tend to somehow find excuses to whatever, exchange one control to another one, which is easier to implement, but it will definitely have a compromise of the usability. And there, the designer should stay within the team of 10 and really ensure that all those kind of later changes during the development process are not harming the user experience of the initially designed solution. That means the effort for a designer in those human-centered design-led projects is, let's say, bigger and stronger at the beginning, but we still need them also in the development phase, at least in their role as an advocate.
Very, very well said. So with that, any final thoughts from the group that you'd like to share? This is bite-sized, so we always take bite-sized pieces of advice. I know we're up against the hour here, so I want to be respectful of your time, but just want to open it up real quick to see if you want to share anything with our audience as final thoughts.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's also what it's not been said. It's what I experienced in the team itself. It's that our management trusts in us. So I think we have a bottom-up approach. So if we have an idea, for example, Karen with her workshops, that was her idea, and she got the mandate to develop it. So you get the freedom to do what you think is good for the team. And that is very often underestimated, I think, in other teams. So management should trust the people they hire.
Absolutely. That is so well said. I think we need a t-shirt. Do Germans wear t-shirts? Is that allowed? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good. Oh, good look at you. You just wild rebel over there. Perfect. Anything else from the group before we wrap? Well, amazing job, you
Maybe
guys.
I can give some.
Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
Some final statements. So from my end, so I'm coming from the old world. So I was long time developing stuff in SAP, right, and just turned the metal 2 years back. And I can only echo what others say. So if you once understand the value of this human-centered design to innovation, then you strongly believe in it. And the feedback we get on our roadshows we do, on the AI roadshows we are going in collaboration with big partners, we can see that it takes some time in the beginning to do some, to convince also the audience in order to take it over. But once they get it, they're all in. And that's basically the feedback we get also from our workshops, right? That people say, hey, I will take your assets back to my company and do the same exercise again. So, and that's basically one of, you can call it KPI feedback, however you call it, but that's basically why we are traveling so much and trying to bring the human-centered approach to innovation to the outside world.
Love that. It's a campaign. It's a movement. Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for all of your great comments and engaging in this conversation. It really is what is the lifeblood of this episode and keeps, our guests coming back. We're very grateful for your time. Just as a reminder, Bite Size is live each week. It depends on the day. So definitely follow us on YouTube or follow us on LinkedIn at The Confluential or my profile. We will on the 30th actually be continuing our talks with an SAP executive, but we'll be talking about supply chain specifically and looking at how you can optimize your supply chain in a time of disruption. So definitely another great creative conversation. So thank you to the audience. Thank you for our guests. You can get all of the information in our description notes. Follow us for more, and we will see you next week.